Hi, everybody. RivkaLeah here with another installment of From Darkness to Radiance. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy that you're all here. And I have another wonderful guest with me tonight. Again, somebody that I met through school, and he was just recently with me at a personal development seminar. So I got to speak with him and get to know him pretty well. And I'm very excited for all of you to hear some of his story and all of the wonderful things that he has to say. So I have Bob with me tonight. So welcome, Bob. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, Rivka. I'm really happy to be here. I've been thinking about this for days and actually, for like the past couple of weeks since we first talked about it. I'm really happy to be here. So hopefully people will get something useful out of this.
I'm
That's my goal.
positive they were. You have a wealth of information, and it has just been a pleasure speaking with you and hearing some of your story, and all of just the little tidbits that you have been fascinating. And I really enjoy getting other people's viewpoints because there's always something that I can take away from that. Somebody, the way they look at things is maybe different than the way I look at things, and it's like, hey, you know what? I like that better. So I've been really impressed with a lot of the things that you've said. So I'm very happy that you're here to be able to share it with other people.
Well, great. So I'm just going to start by giving a little introduction of myself. Who I am, where I'm at, what I'm doing,
Absolutely.
and then maybe get into a little bit more meat, so to speak. Talk about um, talking about having a successful mindset, um, overcoming obstacles and adversity, and maybe or generating wealth, and how
I
do
think that
people
would
go
be
about doing that?
perfect.
So yeah, so um, so I'm right now I'm living in Florida, and there's a story behind that. Why am I in Florida? And I've been here for a year or so now. Um, had moved from California, so I was in the Bay Area for about 25 years. And on my day job, I'm an electrical engineer. So I do power design, and I automotive power systems has been my specialty for a while. So
Okay.
that's my day gig, and and so I'm getting on. I'm 67. I just turned 67, so
I
getting
never
on.
would have guessed that. So
No, and I say that because, when we were at the conference, and people were introducing themselves, and I think one of the questions was, how old are you? And some of the people didn't, I think there was one lady that didn't really, want to fess up or something, right? And so I think, barring one of the instructors, I was like second to oldest one there, right? One of the instructors is like a year or two older than me,
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
and so I just say, and at the time I was 66, right? I just turned, so I said I'm 66 years young. And I think, and that is a mindset. I think, our society, we are getting older, people are living longer.
Yeah.
And so, 60 is the new 40, right? 40 is I mean, I don't know, maybe not, but I think, you're only as old as you think you are, right? Inside your body, if you can do things to maintain your health. Gosh, that's not even one of the things I had on my list. Health. Let's talk about health, but that's interesting because we want to be successful in all areas of our life, and we want to be successful in our physical life, our personal life, our professional life. We want success, but we have to expend energy in these areas, and they have to become important to us, if we're going to be successful there. And I think about like some of the other people, that I've known, and people in my family and people in my life, and how I've seen other people that haven't taken care of their health,
Yeah.
um, meet an early end, so to speak. And, and I look at, like my dad was very, very active, and um, he exercised, he's bicycled, I mean, he would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to the Y, to go swim in the pool before everyone else got there, that kind of thing. And I'm like, and he lived to be 87. Okay. And, and my mom, who smoked, like, couldn't stop smoking. She passed at 83, right? And so she, and if she hadn't smoked, she wouldn't have had problems with COPD. She wouldn't, these other things that came up, probably would have, what she would have lived to be a lot longer. So I think about that, and I think about, like, what have I done in my life, um, and and a lot of these things, they're not. Some of these things, just, you don't think about them when you're doing them, and when you look back, you can say, "Oh, I wasn't thinking about that, but there must have been something there for it to become important to me," right?
Right.
So those things that we have going on in our head, that we're telling ourselves, these are the things that we convinced ourselves are true, and then we go about and we live our lives according to them. And so when I was in the Bay Area, I'm not a physical fitness nut. I am not by any means a gym rat. Going to the gym is like the most boring thing to me in the whole wide world. But I do want to maintain my physical health. And so, at one point, I was drinking too much, right? And I'm like, this is no good. This is no good. And one day I just decided enough is enough, and I just stopped, right? And okay, and but what is it, but how, people say, well, how can you do that? And then at another point, I was just, I'd been smoking cigarettes for so many years, and I'm like, this is killing me. I have to stop. And I just stopped, you
Right,
know,
but this is all mindset, which is something that we had been talking about previously. And what you think is what you become. You set your mind on something and that's where you go. And I spoke about this recently about disease. People say we have this disease or that disease. Well, this disease is the dis-ease of your mind. And that's your mindset. So you can think yourself into becoming older. You can think yourself into becoming sick. And I think that that has become a norm in society. And like you said, we want to focus on all the areas of our life, our physical area, our, you know, personal with professional, everything. We want to focus on this. So we need to use our mind and keep it healthy and focus on exactly what we want to do.
right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And so, when I look at things that I've done, and how I've applied that to my life, I think of, like, just going back to, like, early childhood and growing up, and what are some of the things that I learned, that I internalized, that have really helped me move forward in my life. And I, like, my mom, she's a single mom, right? She had My brother and I were a year apart. She living in Hartford, Connecticut. And when I was, like, about to go into first grade, she spirited us off to California, to San Jose. And
That's a big change from Connecticut to
well,
San
yeah,
Jose.
previously, my brother and I had been living with my grandparents, her parents. And so that was my early childhood, was there while she was, you know, trying to get jobs, working in and out. She was, I mean, she had, this, like, I was not planned. That I am entirely sure. She was still in high school, bless her soul, right? And my dad was a Korea War vet, a little bit older. So yeah, that, I think there was almost a shotgun wedding going on there or something. So she
But
spirited us off to San Jose so that she would have nothing to do with my dad, and he didn't know. And she was in violation of however many court orders were in place and all that stuff. And we did actually get to go back to see my grandparents and my grandmother, my father's mother, from time to time. But she, and when I think of all the things, the experiences I had growing up, and I can think of some really pivotal moments that shaped me, and I just like to share some of those things. And absolutely, okay. Well, so at one point, I wanted, I thought I would like to join the school band, and I thought that playing trumpet was something I would want to do. And I told my mother, and she took me to the pawn shop, and we bought a used trumpet. She didn't rent one; she got a used trumpet, and I'm like, wait a minute, now I own this trumpet. I have to learn how to play it, right? I couldn't, and so that was one of the things that I learned really early on, is that I made a commitment by asking for this thing. I made a commitment that it was something that was going to be important to me. My mother took it seriously, and she went out and actually bought me one. Used or not, at the pawn shop is what she could afford, but she actually bought it for me. Now I had to learn to use it, right? And so I played trumpet all through school, all the way through high school. And I think, and that's not just, but wait, there's more. So not only, so then, I was watching circus, and I said, wow, that would be really cool to ride a unicycle. Oh boy, guess what? I got a
the
unicycle.
unicycle shows up on the doorstep.
I got a unicycle for Christmas. Now I got to learn to ride this unicycle. And I did. And I taught myself to ride a unicycle. And we were in San Jose. We moved to Berkeley. And, and, and so, I'm this kid, riding a unicycle from the Berkeley campus down Telegraph Avenue to where my mom had a leather shop. And like, I was just, I was having all kinds of fun with that. And so that was really neat. But that's another lesson in commitment, is like, I said I wanted it, and now I have it. And am I going to be, the dumb fuddy that just leaves it in the corner because it's too hard, or am I going
Right.
to actually apply myself
Well,
to ride that? And
those are great life lessons that you started at a very young age with, that I think some people forget about. That, what is that? I think our most formative years are up to the age of 7. That's where our base comes from. And if you've gotten all of that, you know, say, "Hey, I really wanna do this," and it's handed to you, well, that's, like you said, that's a commitment. And, I have always told my son, "If you're gonna start it, you need to finish it. But if you don't wanna, when you're done, when you finished it, if that's not something you wanna continue to pursue, that's fine, but you can't just stop just because it gets hard. You have to at least finish what you start."
right. Yeah, I didn't need that. I didn't need that lecture. I just, because I realized, you know, single mom,
Yeah,
working a regular job, trying to take care of 2 little boys with her schedule.
yeah,
And it's like, I knew it was hard for her, and so, and she, but I mean, she was able to learn to do like anything. I think her first job in San Jose was at the San Jose Mercury News, which is the local newspaper. I have no idea what she was doing there. I know that, before we moved from Connecticut, she went to New York and was like, she was the weather girl. I don't
oh,
know. This is 1950s. She was a weather girl. Yeah, no kidding. She had 78 LPs in the attic of her broadcast. I don't know what ever happened to them. They're probably long gone by now with all the family moving. But yeah, so I saw her, and one of the boyfriends that she had, I mentioned she had a leather shop. Um, she didn't know anything about leatherworking, but this boyfriend, who was also a photographer, taught her to do leatherwork. And so this is a perfect business. I don't know. I mean, I'm a little older, so I grew up in the 1960s, right? I was born in 56. 1968, Telegraph Avenue, Berkeley, leather shop, custom handmade sandals for the hippies.
Oh,
Like, can you think of a better market?
I was gonna say, so the business was booming.
Yeah, no kidding. This is the right time to be in that business, right? And so I still remember the name of the shop. It was called the Glass Menagerie. And
Oh,
so,
that's
and it
fun.
wasn't just leather goods, but there was lots of they had some other partners and they sold, stuff. And so that was kind of neat. But, and then, so that was an interesting lesson too, because I remember the wall, and this was in an alleyway. There was this wall that it was just a concrete wall that needed to be painted, and I the offer was 50 cents an hour to paint the wall, and I'm like, okay, well, you got to remember this is not. I mean, 50 cents will
Right,
get
it was
you in the
the
movie.
'60s, that was a lot of money then. I mean,
That'd get you in the movies, right? I could go watch I could go to the movies for 50 cents, right?
right,
UA Theater down the street, right? So that wasn't,
and
that was
get popcorn.
right. Well, but anyway, but once I started it, I'm like, this is really hard and it's really boring, and I don't need money for anything this much. So I didn't stick with that one. But so anyway, I hadn't made a long-term commitment on that. I didn't sign a contract.
Right.
That wasn't something I had, uh, you know, uh, taken out a contract for. So anyway, um, but and so we lived around the Bay Area. And there's another person that she met, is a and who turned into a really good long term friend over her life. And the family was the Carters, and his dad was their family was pretty well to do. They were pretty wealthy, and I learned to swim in their pool in the Bay Area. They had a pool with a diving board. I learned to dive. I learned to
Wow.
swim. I mean, it was really nice. And we would go on the weekends. Sometimes we'd go to the beach in Santa Cruz. We drive over the mountains to get over the hill, they call it, to get to Santa Cruz, and and we'd swim there. But there I just and thinking back, I'm like, there were some really interesting life lessons that I learned just hanging around this family. And I mean, they did. I mean, like his mom would play bridge with the other ladies, and they would do those kind of things. But one of the things that really stuck out to me is, like, they lived in an average house. They had average cars. I mean, they had a pool in their backyard, okay, but other people did too. But it wasn't necessarily about how they projected themselves to the outside world. It's what they had for their family and the values that they had and the values that they lived by. And I could see, other people that living paycheck to paycheck, have to buy that fancy car and the skis and the snowboard and the jetmobile and the this and the that, but then they've got nothing to show for it, right?
Right.
They got some stuff, but then they
Material
got
items
this,
do not make you wealthy.
and they buy the new car with the payment, and they've got the jumbo loan on their home, and they've got, and they're so buried that they never get out from that. And what I learned from the Carters was, no, no, we don't buy things on credit. We just buy them, and we keep them and we maintain them. And they had a reasonably good, they had a station wagon. And I remember them talking about the station wagon. And it's like, well, is it time to retire it, or should we rebuild the engine and keep it for another 100,000 miles? Right. And they're like, well, no, the body's good. Let's just rebuild it and we'll keep it for another 100. And that's about as long as you could get with American made cars in those days. It was about 100,000 miles out of them, right? Before
Can you
the
get
engine.
that now? I'm not sure.
Can you get that now? Well, I don't know. I've got a not American made car in the garage that's pushing, uh, uh, you know, 230,000, but that's a Subaru anyway.
I was gonna say the non-American ones you can.
But so like I think back on that, and I mean, there's lots of life lessons that I learned as a child that kind of stuck with me, and I've taken forward into my life, and I look at, and like just like and you can consider what or most people doing with their life. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They're never really getting ahead. They're not really taking care of their health so much. And like, so after I quit smoking, and I'm going to go back to that for just a minute, because I said, you know what? I was so tired of being stuck in rush hour traffic. It's like I just hate sitting there in this traffic doing absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
I can't. It's such. I mean, yeah, I could put on an audiobook and I can listen to whatever NPR or whatever, or listen to a reasonably good radio show or something like that. Just say, you know what? I'm just going to start biking to work. So I quit smoking. I started biking. I'm biking to work. I take the light rail because I bike to the light rail station, take it, and then bike at the other end of work. And I did that for years. And I look at the Bay Area's got these great bike lanes. I mean, the South Bay anyway, not the East Bay, but the South Bay has got these great bike lanes. And I look at this and I'm like, I'm going down the expressway. I've got this big bike lane. I'm the only one there. I might see one or two other cyclists on the way to work, and everybody's driving by in their car. And I'm
Yep.
like, I'm not one of them, right? I'm not one of them. I'm doing something a little different. What am I doing? I don't know that it was actually better for my health because, one car accident, one scrape with a car, a bus, and, I could
Right,
be dead.
that and the fumes and all that, but it was a good step.
But yeah, and so and I think about that, and I've never bought a new car. I've never had a new car payment. um and I've tried to avoid financing cars as much as possible. I'll find one that looks good, I buy it, I maintain it,
Right.
and then at some point it needs to be retired. Okay, off with you, and get another one. But so like, so I got, cars are paid for. I have a motorhome. I have a 1987, believe it or not, motorhome. It's a General Motors chassis. It's the name of the company that built it is Georgie Boy Manufacturing. But it's only got about 100,000 miles on it, right? And I keep it going, and I've replaced the transmissions, just the engine work, the tires, you know, and yeah, it looks like one of those homeless ones on the outside, you know, but but when you go inside, it's like this nice, comfy space, right?
But if you're
And
maintaining things, you know, they last a long time and you get out of it what you're putting into it. You're maintaining it and you're getting a lot of use out of it,
right.
a lot of memories, a lot of enjoyment. And, that kind of is like, in my opinion, that's creating wealth because you're not just out spending the money,
Well,
right?
right, and so yeah, and we used, and so that motorhome allowed us to have all of these family adventures that we might not have had. I mean, like, um, I mean, I have 3 boys, and they're in Boy Scouts, and I was Cub Scout leader and Boy Scout leader. How does that happen? I don't know. Like I see other parents, and like I volunteered to be coach for T-ball, and I'm like, okay, so and other parents aren't, and I'm like, okay, so why am I? And I think about it. Why am I stepping out and doing more in my community? Why am I doing more, in these other areas of my life. And when I look at successful people, I see successful people are always busy. Why? Because they're always involved with something. They're always doing something. And it's not necessarily, all about, staying in the office till 11 o'clock at night to get. No, that's not that kind of busy. That's not the kind of busy
No,
that I'm talking
it's
about.
your values and your mindset.
Right. Yeah. And so, that's actually allowed me to, as and us as a family to have all of these great adventures that we wouldn't have had otherwise. Now, could I have traded in that motorhome and got a new one? Sure. But I'd much rather take my money and put it into some investments that are going to grow, because the motorhome is not an investment, it's an
No.
expense, right?
Yes, it
I
is.
mean, it depends. Okay, so it's allowed me, but financially, it's not a wealth building investment. It's just not. It's an expense, and but again, so I would much rather take instead of spending $100,000 for another motorhome, put $100,000 in the stock market, and yeah, that's a risk too. And I've won and I've lost and I've won again, and I've had my ups and downs there too. But that's all part of like really, you know, being able to have a little bit of vision that you need to do, a little bit more than what everyone else is doing, or something a little bit differently than what everyone else is doing. Otherwise, you're going to wind up just like, the rest of the folks out there.
The
And,
sheep
and,
crawling along.
and yeah, it's like the cows that follow each other out to the field in the morning, and then they follow each other back to the barn to get milked at night. And, you're going nowhere. And so, I think about that, and like, how do we rise above our circumstances? And what and I look at like where I was at one point. I remember I was uh, we were having some trouble with our relationship. We got two little boys, I said, and I didn't like my job, and I decided I was going to move. We were living in Massachusetts. I was going to get a job, an engineering job in New Hampshire. And so I found a daycare. I found a apartment house for rent, and I got us moved. And I've got these two little boys that I'm trying to take care of by myself. And I'm like, okay, so I'm an engineer. I'm working a professional job, and I'm struggling so bad. I remember one day I had $5 in my pocket and nothing in the house for dinner. And like, what am I going to do? I've got two little boys that need to be fed, you know, and what's it going to be? It's like, a package of hot dogs and some frozen peas and whatever the heck we yeah, and that was dinner, right? Um, and I'm like, how the heck, if I've gone to, and by the way, I only went to two-year school, and that's a whole other story about, um, uh, so I went to I'd gone in the Army getting out of high school. I didn't I could have gone to college. That's a whole other story too, but I went in the Army instead. And then I got out of the Army, and I messed around, and I messed up so bad, and did all kinds of stupid things and got myself in a bunch of trouble, and said, you know what, I really need to take advantage of the GI Bill and go back to school, which is what I did. And so I did. I got a 2-year engineering degree as a technician, and I had a pretty bad girlfriend at the time, who was always always doing crazy stuff. And so at one point, um, she absconded with one of my checks that was supposed to be my tuition, and that kind of derailed my whole school plan. So
Right.
anyway, so I took a summer job, which turned into a full-time job, and I was actually but I wasn't really happy with just working on a production line, right? I wasn't, that production line environment just wasn't for me. I wanted to be like designing stuff. I wanted to be, like um, working on the big systems and working on all this stuff. So, and I was dead set that I was not going to stay in this production line job, and I was not going to let a 2-year degree hold me back from what I wanted to do. And so, I worked really hard. I studied on my own, and I actually worked into a design engineer's job, with a 2-year degree. And I'm like, okay, this is life is going along pretty well. And and I had always wanted to go back to school, but I just never got around to doing that, right?
Because
But
you're living your life and you were creating a difference, you were making your memories, your mindset was where it needed to be. So I
yeah,
don't think it held you back.
no, no, it didn't. And that's what, and I think people think that if I get to here, then I will have this,
Right.
right? And it's no,
They're
no.
chasing the happiness. If I do this, I'll finally be happy. Oh, I didn't get happy when I got there. Now I need to do this.
And
That's not how it works.
and no, it doesn't. And but so I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. But I got to this point that I'm working in this small engineering company in New Hampshire. I worked myself up to like engineering manager, and I never wanted to manage people. I mean, I just want to tinker. I just like to build stuff, right? I love to, it's creative, right? It's a way to, I mean, I go, it's a way to, you're creating something from nothing, right?
Right.
And so that I found really interesting. But, but I kind of took the position because the options were like, I got to work for that guy or that guy. No, 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 no. Better if it's me, and even if I don't like filling out, annual reviews and all these forms and all that stuff. And so, but it's like, but still, I was still working paycheck to paycheck, and I could never get ahead. And I'm like, if I'd stayed in New Hampshire and stayed in that job, I could have seen myself in a year or two probably saving enough to get a down payment on, uh, at that time, $100,000 house or something,
Right.
right? And stretching really hard to pay the mortgage on that for the salary that I'm making there, and really having nothing left over to get ahead with. And I'm like, okay, there's got to be, where can I go? What can I do with my life that is going to get me, how do I rise above my circumstances? And then I found out about Silicon Valley. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. And so one of the companies that we were, one of our suppliers of integrated circuits was this company called Linear Technology. And Linear Technology is like the field applications engineer that came to call on me is like, yeah, they're a good company to work with. They're paying 25% profit sharing. 25% profit
That's
sharing.
huge.
That
That's
is
huge.
absolutely huge. I'm saying, I have got to go work for that company. I have got to, right? Because selling rainbow vacuum cleaners wasn't going to do it.
No.
Amway wasn't going to do it.
No.
Okay. I mean, I'm like, door-to-door sales, selling soap. I understand network marketing, but selling soap just wasn't my thing. I didn't believe in the product. I thought it was overpriced, quite
Right.
frankly. So it's not, it's just not there, right? I just, you got to believe in what you're selling in
Yes, you
order to
do.
be successful. And so that just, the seminars were great. Okay. Amway seminars were great. I learned a lot about mindset there too. So that was a good education, but it just wasn't going to get me financially to where I wanted
Right.
to go. And I've heard you talk about some of the other, job experiences that you had along those lines too. I
Yep.
think a little bit. I think what Mary Kay was on your list, I think,
Mary
wasn't it?
Kay was on my list.
And Avon or
And
something?
Avon.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So you know where that's all coming from,
Yep,
right?
and then I was with I don't even remember the name of the company, but selling pots and pans,
Oh,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah, so Amway had pots and pans and makeup and vacuum cleaners and whatever you want, you could have it there
yeah,
too.
yeah.
About 2.5 times the price you could have it anywhere
I
else.
all of these were too. But we live
Yeah,
and we learn, and, our mindset changes as we grow, but at the same time, we go through all of these little things, and we take all the little tidbits out of it, and that's how we progress further, and that's how we get to where we are now, and we continue learning.
right. So yeah, so I was like, and this is 1997 I'm talking about. Okay. And like from the time I made the decision that I was going to go work for that company, I think I was in an interview over there within a month. And I came back from the interview and I gave my 2-week notice. And I went down and the plan for moving was my wife wanted a motorhome. We're going to go buy a used motorhome, not tell the bank that we're moving. We'll just take out the loan. and
And
then we're
go.
and then we're just going to drive. So I bought in 1997, I bought a 10-year-old motorhome that had 50,000 miles on it, right? And I still own it today. And that, and so 6 weeks from making a decision that I was going to go get a job at this company, I had a job at that company and I was driving there to do it. And why, how, and I get there, right? And when I went for the interview, right outside on the front, like big sign right in front of the engineering entrance is home of the gurus, right? I'm like, okay, now I'm going to be a guru. Okay, now I got to act like one. I've got to
Nice.
fake it if I can, until I can actually make it. And so yeah, and that was really an interesting, an interesting process, and it was. But if I hadn't been looking to get out of where I was to something better, if I hadn't had my eyes open, then I wouldn't have had those conversations with the field engineer. I wouldn't have had those conversations about this other company. And, and it's only because I was thinking about it, I was open to it, I was talking about it,
Right.
and so the opportunity presented itself, and
Yes, I
and
was to
I
say
went,
opportunities come when they're supposed to come, but
right.
your mindset has to be right. You have to be in the right space for it to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how these things work. And when I think about, you know, all the good decisions that I've made, all the bad decisions that I've made, what's gone on, I've learned that, and I learned this a long time ago. Whatever baggage you have, whatever that is that's holding you back, whatever those, those in, I mean, and we've all had bad things happen to us. We can't change bad things. We've all made bad decisions for ourselves. But I've really learned that you can't live in that space. If you live in that space, you'll get stuck in that space. And
Yep,
the only way that you can get around it is to forgive yourself,
yep.
right? And it's the hardest person to forgive is yourself, quite frankly.
Yes, it is.
We're harder on ourselves than anyone else, right? Aren't we? I think we all are,
Right.
and so you have to learn to just, okay, I made a mistake. I can't change that. All I can do is learn from it and move forward with it. And so I can't dwell on that and get stuck there. I have to recognize it. I'm not going to forget it, but it's how I look on that event and how I look back on that event that is going to determine where I'm going to go with that in the future. Is it something that's going to hold me back, or is it something that's going to propel me forward? And that's a real thing.
It
Um,
definitely is. Well, you've had an absolutely amazing life. I've said this to a couple people, but I want you back because I want to hear more about this. I think we need to dive into a little bit more and find out some more of your thoughts on how society has changed and what we can maybe do to help people get into this headspace and this mindset to maybe pay it forward to bring some other people along with us. So I think I might need to have you come back. What do you say?
I think so. I didn't get to hardly anything on my list of stuff to talk about. I mean, we just scratched the surface. I've got, so many other things. I mean, you know, trauma versus adventure, I think I mentioned,
Yeah.
and there's a story there. There's plenty of stories there, and just, um, you know, and like just, how, I don't know. I don't know. There's a ton of stuff, but
Well, like you said, we've just scratched the surface. So I am definitely going to have you back. I am positive that our audience would love to hear more. And because like I said, I learned a little bit more tonight and there's some other ideas I have floating around in my head on how I can look at things differently now. So it's always a pleasure speaking to you and getting your perspective. And I love hear everyone else's perspective just so that I can say, hey, that's something new, something I need to think about for myself. So I really appreciate you coming on with me and appreciate you sharing. And we will schedule another time because there is way more that we need to dive into.
absolutely, Rivka. I really appreciate it. It's been
Awesome.
great.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you again. And thank you, everybody, for being here. And I look forward to seeing everybody again soon. So, cheers, everybody.